nap time? Is it nap? Okay, nap time not allowed today. We're going to skip nap time and go directly into climate. I brought 3 things with me today that you need. 3 of 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yes, 3 of you need to take home with you. And trying to figure out how to do this fairly. What does this appear to be? It's a map. It's 3 maps of the same thing, and it's the last. And I think I've done this once or twice before at the forum. The last of the hand-drawn average annual precipitation maps printed by the USGS, drawn by the Colorado Climate Center in the early and mid-1980s. History, but not ancient history. But, you know, stuff becomes ancient history surprisingly fast. So 3 of you should win this, but I haven't figured out a good system to give them away. So I thought that we would do it this way. I'm going to ask you a question, and the first 3 people to answer it, they don't have to be correct, they just have to answer it. 17! Yeah, it has to be a 4-digit number that starts with a 2. Oh! I hope he's not right. Here, the question that I was going to ask was, when will, instead did. Usually I did, when did something happen? This time it's going to be, when will something happen? When will the next extreme flash flood occur in the state of Colorado? In what year? 2014. Okay, I've heard one here, I heard one back there, and one here. Do you know who the first 3 to answer were? There's one. There's one in the back, there's one in the middle. 3 people have identified themselves as winners of the map. If by chance you wish not to win, and by the way, Paul is about ready to distribute the prizes to the winners. Okay. He was trying to be inconspicuous, so he has no idea who they were. So it's got to be the same 3 that raised their hands before. I guess. Here's the rubber bands that go with it to make it more valuable.
I think there's been some stuff here today.
Do not wrinkle those maps. And if you find the map burdensome, find somebody who really appreciates it. We hold on to a few dozen of these at the Colorado Climate Center, and we'll carry some over into the next century, hopefully, but we don't have a lot of them. This is an important year. I knew from the day that we said Water 2012, Year of Water Celebration, that it would be a year where we had to kind of confine our celebration to a limited amount of water. And that's sort of how it's playing out. There's not that much water to celebrate, so we got to celebrate what we've got greatly. So I'm all for it. So I want to begin by what you really want to know, and that is, will we get precipitation? And I pulled out the Leadville forecast for a little while ago, and I couldn't quite format it to put it on my PowerPoint very well, but it says partly sunny today, high 64, at an elevation of 9,597 feet. How often do you see 64 degrees at 9,597 feet in April? The answer is not very often. What was the temperature? Those of you who live here in Leadville, what was your high temperature yesterday? Yeah, because I didn't check it before I came, but it was undoubtedly mid-60s. And you know what? If you had sufficient water, you wouldn't even be worrying about it. You'd be rejoicing in this weather. I know we had a neat young man work for us at the Colorado Climate Center for a couple of years who grew up in Leadville, and he's now a meteorology student at University of Oklahoma. and doing quite well. And he was on the Leadville baseball team. The Leadville baseball team had a heck of a time being competitive, and you know why? They had trouble finding a place to play other than in the gym to practice. And if you play on a basketball surface to learn to field grounders, and then you go out in the real field, it just ain't the same. So this year you can actually play baseball in Leadville. And when did the ground first melt out here? Or did it ever accumulate any snow? We've had an easy winter. Okay, then tonight, mostly cloudy. Tomorrow, chance of rain, snow. And in fact, if the probabilities would have shown up, I believe there's a National Weather Service person in the back of the room. Yes, yes, National Weather Service. Was it 50% chance for tomorrow? Maybe. 50. This year, 50% chance feels pretty good. But chance of rain, snow Thursday night, chance of showers. By the way, in April you still usually get snow, and now we're talking about showers. So it's been an odd and discomforting year. At least there's precipitation in the forecast. In fact, here's the national precipitation forecast out through next Monday for the accumulated precipitation for the next 5 days on a national scale. And there's a big swath of precipitation from the west coast through the northern Rockies, dipping down into your basin, except that there's this little notch in your basin. You had that notch in your basin all of last year, I believe. And then some moisture out across the plains, and then on to the east, which has been very dry. By the way, if any of you have land in Georgia, no Georgia landholders here. It's not a good time for landholders in Georgia. They've gone from one drought to the next. This is the forecast for the first week of May, for those of you who trust the 8 to 14 day forecast. On the left-hand side on your left-hand side is the temperature anomalies, and this is a high confidence that the temperatures will be above average for the first week of May. What does that mean for you in the water management world? It means a couple things. It means runoff, and it means evapotranspiration. And then you come over to this side, and what you really want to see, hello, whoopsie. What you really want to see is you want to see above. You want to see above average precipitation for the next week, and in fact you see sort of in the middle. So some chances. It was looking like we were going to do a significant shift towards frequent storms, cooler weather, but now it's looking like maybe that's a temporary shift, that we get 5 days worth of trying to extract a little moisture from the atmosphere, and then we revert back to what we've been having. So now that we've taken care of the important business, now we can talk about the fun stuff, which is old news, which is what I seem to be best at, which is telling you what has happened in the past. And those of you who have heard me speak, which, darn it, it's been most of you, know that I'm a weather historian, Colorado Climate Center, Colorado State University, and I track mostly using the observed data from official weather stations that have been in place in Colorado for as long as possible, and use that to try to describe what our climate history has been. And as you have learned, we've got, in your basin in particular, long historical records. Long, in this case, refers to on the order of, well, look at that. Weather data began up on the top of Pikes Peak. Do you see the size of that building? Do you see what year I'm not sure they got it built in 1873. They got the observatory up there in 1873. They began round the clock, round the calendar observations up there from 1873 to the late 1880s, drove those poor soldiers, because they were part of the U.S. Signal Service, literally drove some of them crazy. The alcohol consumption, we understand, was significant. And they telegraphed their data back to the ground, to a ground station in Colorado Springs, as long as that blasted telegraph line stayed up, which wasn't all the time. And that's almost 140 years ago. And the premise of installing that weather station and maintaining that up on the top of a mountain starting that long ago was that that was believed to really increase the chances that we would be able to predict the weather better. And after they did that for 16 years, their conclusion was that the observations on top of Pikes Peak did not help them do a better job of forecasting the weather in the valley. So that was curious. As we look backwards, Pikes Peak is not a representative peak of what's going on in the region as a whole. If you put a mountain observatory somewhere in Colorado and wanted to use it to tell you about meteorological conditions affecting precipitation and water supply, you would not choose Pikes Peak as your observatory. You'd put it on somewhere else farther to the west. The other piece of interest, and how many of you have heard the saying, some of you have affiliations with your local Chamber of Commerce, how many of you have heard the saying, 300 days of sunshine for whatever town it may be? Look, the hands are going up, and more hands would go up if you felt like stretching. And your assumption when you heard that was that somebody observed that thoroughly, carefully, with instrumentation or very systematic observing methodologies. Do you know where that information first appeared in print? It first appeared in print, to my knowledge, in New York City in 1870. And based on no data. But based on observers who did realize when they moved here, because most people who came to Colorado came here from back east, or in some cases directly from Europe. And in all cases, they were coming from places that the sun did not shine as much. And it sure as heck seemed like it was 300 days of sunshine. And it really wasn't a bad guess. It just was a guess. And it was just fascinating to see that history. You will, some of you sitting in the front row might be able to read the small print here, but I found this so fascinating. Some of you were at Colorado Water Congress and you heard me recite from this 1918 report of the Agricultural Experiment Station of the Colorado Agricultural College, now Colorado State University, my institution. And the report name was Colorado Climatology, and I just excerpted 2 quotes out of it because I did. They were interesting. Colorado, I should have washed my glasses before doing this, being an arid state, the amount of precipitation is at all times a vital question. Not some of the time, all times. Liability to a marked deficiency in rainfall in any region, not just your region, is a matter of grave concern to those engaged in agriculture and other interests. We often hear it stated that the rainfall is changing, that the setting up of the country, the settling up, I mean, of the country, and the planting of trees and building reservoirs, forming lakes in wet places throughout the country is causing an increase in the amount of our precipitation. But long series of observations taken at different places over the world do not bear out that claim. So that was one interesting quote. Later in the report, and the title of that little section is Years of Study Shows Climate Not Changing. We often hear the statement made that the climate is changing. Again, when is this report written? 1918. And the popular belief that such is the case can only be explained by the generally short and defective memories of people who, through their exposure to a few severe storms in the past, or inconvenience, or perhaps loss from a few of them, unintentionally, he was being kind, exaggerate the severity and frequency of their occurrence. Although large fluctuations occur at different years with some indication of periodical terms would be cycles. Periodical terms. Especially in Colorado, where the range of temperature is great, there seems to be no progressive change. These fluctuations are large and often in the same direction for several successive years. So this was the state of the knowledge in 1918, and this was a very nicely done report, by the way. So with that, I want to show you the benefit of sticking with observing climate in a fairly systematic way over a period of time, and I'm going to show you selected stations with long records, some of them beginning before 1900 and continuing to this day. I regret to say we do not have a single long-term station with continuous observations that date back this long at the high elevations in the upper part of your watershed. We do have Climax molybdenum mine with over 60 years of continuous uninterrupted data collection. Okay, so what you're looking at here is year by year, water year, which is October through September, precipitation, the ups and downs, and those ups and downs are real and big, and you sort of see little cycles here and there. And then I imposed on this a 30-year running average. And I'm interested in 30 years because just this last year we updated our climate statistics to the new 30-year normals. Just what you've wanted, right? It's now, the map that I gave you is now 3 cycles out of date. That was 51 through 80. There was then 61 through 90. There was then 71 through 2000. And now new maps will come out hopefully later this year. They're all computer generated now. It'll be the 1981 through 2010. But there you can see in the lower portion of your basin down at Los Animas what the running average, can you see my, yep, there it is. You can see that we started pretty good, declined, improved, improved, declined, and then despite this chaotic ups and downs of the last nearly 20 years, are still at a higher average than at any point during the 100 and almost 30 years of continuous record at that site. So, hallelujah. Nobody's saying hallelujah back, but Rocky Ford, a little upstream, and interestingly, a little upstream, but the average is just about the same. Look at that. And what is that average? It's only 12 to 13 inches of precipitation a year. That's not exactly a lot to celebrate. But Rocky Ford, there we go. What are they doing? Well, sort of the same, a little bit different in terms of the long-term pattern. But again, recently, chaotic, but higher on this recent average, even with the nastiness of 2002 and the nastiness of 2011 on that graph. How did Los Animas look in 2011? Ooh. It's amazing that the averages can be up with some of the dry years that we've had. Again, do you see any role here for water managers when you look at the variability of precipitation? So, I thank you for what you do, by the way. Canyon City, we're moving upstream, and yet the average is not changing that much. We're still only 12 to 13 inches, and a little bit of missing data. I'm sorry, they moved it from the prison. They no longer, the station was at the prison, at the old prison for many, many years. But again, ups and downs, and an ever so slightly upward trend over the long 100-plus year period. our headwaters, climax, where we have at least 64 years of continuous data, and curiously, a slight turn in the upward direction, and again, you benefited from a good, I don't know exactly why it moves on me, but I'm touching something I shouldn't. A good 2011, a good 2008 and 7. So this year, by the way, is on a different path, more like the 2002 path. Okay, now, you saw those variations. Again, I say we often work in 30-year averages. Are you asleep yet? This could get boring. 30-year averages. This was the average when we first computed, not me, but somebody computed them in 1920 when they draw their first statewide map in 1920 based on these averages. And look at this, January through December. There's what the first averages were. There was what the averages were that were used to create the maps that I just handed out, the 1951 through 80 period. And now, voila, there are the averages by month for the last 30 years of the new averages that we're just analyzing and mapping. So what are we doing precipitation-wise? You have to say it's pretty similar. Pretty similar, a little higher, just ever so higher in some of the months, but really within all the big scheme of what the climate does, pretty darn similar. Move up to Rocky Ford. There's the first averages computed in 1920. Look at that nice July. That was the odd thing. We haven't seen that since. There was the 51 through 80 averages, and there's our most recent average. A little change in seasonality, but not so much. It looks like Rocky Ford used to have a little wetter springs than they have recently, and they probably just had one monster flood one year in July that affected that early 30-year average. But moving up, Canyon City, are you having fun yet? These are things climatologists just celebrate and rejoice, and we have big conferences talking about. And we don't drink beer or anything. We just talk about these statistics. Here's Canyon City, the earliest average of 1920, the 51 through 80, the 81 through 2010. The basic shape of the seasonal curve still staying the same. In the case of Canyon City, getting a little wetter in summer, not much different the other time of year. Now we come up the valley, but here I don't have an 1891 through 2020 average as a baseline. I've just got these recent two periods in Buena Vista for the benefit of the folks who really live there. 51 through 80, 81 through 2010. Darn similar, ever so slightly wetter except in midwinter. And finally, up to climax, again, where we just have the two periods. Now you're high enough that you finally get generous winter and spring precipitation most years. There's the older average, there's the new average, where the early part of the season is about the same, and lo and behold, just like Canyon City, July, August have been getting a little wetter. Kind of interesting. Okay, this is just too boring, but I wanted to show you anyway, because I know after lunch you want to look at these sort of statistics. This is the old temperature averages. Man, I don't have the old ones. Okay, I started up the stream, now I'm going back down the stream. This is just the 51 through 80 temperatures. There they are, and then the more recent temperatures. Are we warmer? We're warmer. Not much, a little. Go down to Canyon City. What about Canyon City? There's the original seasonal curve of temperatures when we first computed them back in 1920. Then the 51 through 80. Then the 81 through 2010. What's interesting is that during this period, the thermometers were behind prison walls. And we have reason to believe the temperatures were somewhat elevated by the protected prison environment. So I'm not sure that that's the, I mean, it's good data for what it is. It just may not be what you want it to be. Down to Rocky Ford, excellent old records. There's the original 30-year average, then the 51 through 80. Ooh, it is warmer. And then the 81 through 2010, just a little warmer. A little warmer in spring, especially March. And then go down to Los Animas, boom, boom, boom. Big warming occurred then, and then it stayed just about the same. What's interesting is that's when they moved the station to the Los Animas power plant. It was originally at, I think, the sugar factory. Wasn't there a Los Animas sugar factory in the early years? Somebody's got to know. There's head shaking, yes. Then it went to the power plant, which, by the way, power plants give off heat. Sugar plants do too, but again, we got great data. It's not necessarily perfect for what we want to use it for. We now have in the Arkansas River Valley about 5 pristine weather stations in rural environments where it's never supposed to be changed by development within the next 50 years, but we only have 8 years of data, so I can't tell you much how that's trending. So, are we done yet? No. Back to our current situation. I don't know about you. I've been here 35 years now, and that seems like a long time, but some of you have been in your places doing your things for much longer than that. But I will tell you that prolonged below average precipitation is just troublesome. It just never feels good. Even though you know it's happened in the past, it does not feel very good. Here for Buena Vista, sorry, I can't say it how it's supposed to be said, is for just the last 24 months, one graph, the nice smooth curve, is, there we go again, is the average accumulation. If I could do this better, I would. And there is the actual accumulation. It wants to advance by itself. And you will see that just in the summer of 2010, a nice wet summer, then it went dry, and we've had prolonged, continuous precipitation deficit with the exception of, I think, July of last year. Almost every other month has been below average. And you see how both last winter and spring and this winter and spring have been very painfully dry. Go down to Rocky Ford, you see that same sort of thing with a wet summer for a couple months in 2010, then chronically dry. Since then, you go to Walsenburg, those 2 or 3 wet months to begin the 2010 year didn't happen. And look at how far below average they were able to get in just 2 years worth of time. Not quite a year behind in 2 years, but close to it. Those are big deficits. Those are Dust Bowl era type deficits. And here is the national picture as of today as of yesterday of NRCS's snow-tail measurements in each of the basins of the western U.S., mapped in percents of average, where blue colors are the wet ones, the ones that we were pleased to have in parts of our state last year, at least the northern part of the state. We see now you have to pretty much go to Portland and the northernmost Cascades to see way above average snowpack. Pretty darn good for Montana, parts of Idaho, parts of Oregon, and then fortunately from a Colorado River Basin perspective, we do have the Green River. The Green River is in the upper Colorado. The Green River Basin is pretty good on snowpack this year. Not great, but at least not so bad. And then you get close to southern Idaho, all of Utah, all of Colorado, and these percentages are stinking. Just wretched and very similar to 2002. In fact, how are we tracking on some of your favorite snow tells? This is as of yesterday. This is the average path of snow accumulation up at Fremont Pass, and Fremont isn't your wettest pass by any means, but it's water that makes it into the Arkansas, and it's good stuff. This was last year, your really fine, generous year in the upper basin. This is 2002, a bad year. There we go again. And this is this year. So this year, this was a bad time to go flat on us. March and April are supposed to be woohoo. And what are we doing this year? Woohoo. The wrong thing. Fremont Pass is high enough that it hasn't been melting like most of the lower sites, but it hasn't been adding. And that's the problem. Porphyry Creek, which you know where Porphyry Creek is? It's just over Monarch Pass, near the Monarch ski area. It's used in the streamflow forecast for both the Gunnison and the Arkansas, and darn it, it melted out. And it melted out just about the same day as it did in 2002. 2002 didn't get as much winter precipitation as this year, but this year we melted more quicker and ended up at the same point with the same melt out date. Can it reaccumulate there? Yes, we certainly had major accumulation last, and I'm sorry that I cannot control my... I should just be pointing to this thing, shouldn't I? Hadn't thought about that one. Last year, you see, we did put another nice spike on top of things right after we had the Arkansas Arkansas River Basin Water Forum last year. So yes, we can add snow yet. But the question is, will we? It's really hard to add it when it's already gone. And then down farther south where it wasn't nearly as good last year, but hasn't been as bad this year, in the Sangre de Cristos, where we have melted out, but we were not nearly as bad as 2002, but not as good as we'd like to be. And again, just a painfully early meltout compared to normal, a full month or more ahead of time. Just so you see for the arc. There, look. 2012, what's that percentage? That's as of April 1st. You know when you had your drought years. You know them well. You know 77, you know 81, you know 2002, you know 2004. 2012 is right in that same family. Fremont Pass, individual ups and downs all the way back to the late 1930s, where both the SNOTEL automated measurements on top of the manual snow course readings. When they did not do manual readings in 2002, they took about 3 years off. And looking at the long-term trend, using a running 30-year average, slight, statistically insignificant, ever so slight downward trend so far, but a couple of bad years in recent years. Porphyry Creek on the long record, at a little bit lower elevation, there's been a downward trend in your April 1st snowpack, enhanced by some of these really dry years. And in this case, our 2012 year is behaving at that point just about as bad as 2002, just about as bad as 77. We're not in good company here. Nationally, this is the picture right now using the U.S. Drought Monitor, a very simplistic index that tries to put the whole country, despite our big differences in climate regions and types, to put us all on the same playing field. The Texas drought getting better, the southwestern drought expanding and getting worse, the Georgia drought extreme already, fortunately part of the plains in the middle Atlantic and New England is getting some beneficial precip now and again in the forecast. Here is where we were this time last year when we met. The Texas drought was expanding, then whole Missouri Basin and north and upper Mississippi and Ohio were just rolling in water. Colorado had this huge gradient. Remember how wet the mountains were last year and how dry the plains were through April? And then the very next week it changed and we started getting heavy precip north of I-70, but not south of I-70. And so by summer you had this Arkansas and Rio Grande drought phenomena while the rest of the state was just rolling in water. And fortunately your headwaters, your most headwaters counties, Lake Chaffee, had some decent mountain precipitation last year. If it wasn't for that, it would have been a bad deal. So again, there's where we are now, there's where we were last year at this time, and there's where we were in the middle of last summer when the Texas drought reached its worst, and your basin and the Rio Grande shared in that. Your reservoir storage, not bad. This is what the NRCS puts together, and it lumps John Martin in with all your others, so that always makes it a little odd to interpret the results. It always shows you at 30% of capacity unless you've just had a monster flood like in '99. But the stream flow forecast, and I'll show you momentarily the most recent. This was the April 1st. It'll be a few days before the next round come out. But these forecasts, and some of you know your basins better than I do, but generally, even your wetter areas coming off the Sangre de Cristos are still only projected in the 60% of average kind of flow. And as you get up in the upper Arkansas, where you normally get the bulk of your water, the forecasts are in the near 40% of normal stream flow for the April through September period. Inflow projected to Pueblo Reservoir. This is a little model that is updated every day, and you see that we were down to 40% of average inflow projection. Then after that storm a week and a half ago, they upped it a little bit into the mid-40s, and now with another few dry days, it's heading back to 40% of average again. So, are you liking drought? Does it make you feel good? No, it makes me feel awful. But in talking to water managers, drought is the time when your decisions are fewest. You hold water and you release what you have to. And management gets pretty straightforward. When you have high flows, and projected high flows and potential flooding and reservoir spills where you want to hold on to as much as possible, you have lots of challenges. But still, it may be an easier management from the total decisions and how they get made, but it's not a fun time. So instead, let's all celebrate Water 2012, and the way I celebrate is I deploy a few more rain gauges. All right, you got to be honest. How many of you have one of these in your yard? How many of you report somewhat faithfully to me through the CocoRa's network? Somewhat faithfully. Do you realize how much we could improve the network if the rest of you joined? Yes? Yes. Or if you felt like, now maybe I'm not the best person, but you know a neighbor who wouldn't mind doing that. Or you know your favorite school teacher down the road who should be teaching water better than he or she is. Get them involved. The weather is our water. Don't forget it. Yes, you and me, we can do this. I'm up to 4,822 reports since CocoRa started. You too could be there. There's our family of volunteers across the country. There are observers in your basin. There's not as many as we wish. We've got some from right here in Leadville all the way down to Holly, but we could use some more. We could use them in the side valleys up out of the river bottom. Go look for them. Go to my table today, but there's the website, cocoras.org. Was it at the forum? Did you win this at a forum a few years ago. We now have the capacity for people to enter evapotranspiration into the CoCoRaHS website. So if there's nothing, no precip to measure, you can measure what's leaving. And then you got the water balance sort of figured out. It's potential, it's reference evaporation, it's not actual, because when there's no water to evaporate, no water evaporates. But sign up today. I have a table over here. I got gauges to tickle your interest in. Got some hail pads for you who want to measure hail. You know what those are. And what else? So be a part of this fun team. And I really, we just had a water availability task force meeting at the state a little over a week ago. There was optimism that we will have a wet summer. The transition from the La Nina we've been having to ramping towards an El Nino favors wetter conditions. But guess what we said in 2002? We said that in 2002 too. So don't trust the forecasters always. The seasonal predicting more than a week in advance is hard, and predicting the season. But there really is a chance that we could have an improved late spring and summer. And with that, I am always concerned on your lower portion of your basin, well, from about Buena Vista southward, the potential for flash flooding is always there in the summer. When it does rain, you can get doused. So see me, and thank you for letting me blab again at your water forum. I love you.